So, welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for being here. But before we get into the budget proper, I just would like your views on the economic impact of the coronavirus as you see it, right? Potentially on the Singapore economy and the risks that it poses.
We can see workers on the ground having some anxiety over the future of jobs,
right.
In particular employment as well as employability issues. Particularly in several sectors, we have heard it at the budget 2020. Some sectors that were pre-identified, I think hospitality, aviation, travel, tourism and retail are some of the hard-hit sectors by this COVID-19. But we also stand prepared because it will ripple down to possibly other sectors as well. For example, manufacturing, where there are large numbers of foreign workers, some of them who may be still in China and not back in Singapore.
We recently posted a survey, that's last week, asking them what the impact of this COVID-19 on them. This is from a broad membership, so 85% of them are SMEs. The picture is not good. They say that Singapore's economy this year will be adversely affected. That's one. Number two is that their company themselves will be adversely affected. 80% of them says that their revenue will drop by as much as 50%.
Wow.
If you look at the outbreak itself, the key epicenter is China, and China is the biggest trading partner for many of the economies around here, including Singapore. And China is the second largest economy in the world. And that naturally will have impact on a lot of the demand within the region. Supply chains will be disrupted, affected at least in the near term. And then Singapore would feel that impact. In a research piece that we did recently, we think that including Singapore, the regional economies here probably will see 0.5 to 1 percentage point impact on their growth this year. We are assuming that this outbreak lasts between around 6 months, roughly around the time of what SARS was. The worry is if this is more protracted and gets more infectious and more deadly, then the impact would be actually greater.
What COVID-19 highlighted to me is the strengths and weaknesses of globalization today. Supply chains now are so dependent on China, so tightly interlinked, and businesses also are under tremendous pressure to be very lean with manufacturing with their supply chain, such that China shutting down virtually for longer than anticipated. Of course, everybody knew they were going to shut down for Chinese New Year, but because that shutdown has been prolonged, you're seeing now those weaknesses have a ripple effect in supply chains and manufacturing throughout the world. The second issue, I think, with globalization, the weakness again here is that people feel today a lot more connected to the rest of the world, and that means that when something happens in China, the entire world is jumping and feeling, tomorrow people could be coming from that area and infecting us. And that kind of panic is a big problem, because that's one major reason for why Singapore is having a much more severe effect. It's because, in my view, incorrectly, many people around the world think that Singapore is extremely dangerous right now with the COVID-19 outbreak, when the reality is that we're just actually particularly good at contact tracing and identifying cases, and that's something that we have to take account of, that people now feel there's an undue business risk to being in Singapore, even though we're actually just good at tracking cases.
There's a lot for SkillsFuture in this budget. I mean, there's a SkillsFuture top-up, and there's also an additional top-up for people in the 40 to 60 age group. But I think the question about SkillsFuture is, first of all, what is the take-up? And second of all, are people skilling themselves in relevant areas?
So I think this budget has tried to push it at two fronts. We now see a SkillsFuture credit, not just a top-up, not just for individuals, but at the same time, you have a SkillsFuture credit for employers as well, to encourage them to send their workers for training. And I particularly like this year because there's an additional one, additional top-up for those in their 40s and 50s, 40 to 60 years old, another $500. Because I think this particular group, I would say, are the more vulnerable groups.
Manpower is a big challenge for SMEs and for companies, and the way the companies are reacting to it as a strategy is to send people for training. But there are three challenges for training. One is that they have no time. Now they have. For some industries, they have time. Second is that they say that even though there's a lot of government subsidy, it's still expensive. So the SkillsFuture for employers will help lah. So out-of-pocket expenses will help. Third is that they find that the training is not relevant. So not relevant. So I think the relevancy part needs to be tackled, and what the budget has is this training by anchor employers. So is anchor employers training more for the rest of the industry will indeed be more relevant.
I think when you look at the question of aging in the workforce, if you go into any individual company, you won't find that all our companies have exactly the same distribution of age as the general population. What I mean by that is we have companies where the age profile is very young. We've got also companies where actually it's hard for them to hire younger workers. For example, in the tech industry and startups, you may be hard-pressed to find many older workers. It's a problem not just in Singapore, but also in the West as well, in Silicon Valley. For example, hardly find any grey-haired engineers, right?
Right.
And I think if we want to really tackle this problem, it's not just going to be a broad-based solution like wage support and so on that's going to do it. It's actually going to have to be going into companies with a very different age profile from the rest of the workforce and finding out why can you not hire either younger workers or older workers. Why?
In Japan, I was told that they have actually designed sort of living communities for aging their folks, and they brought businesses into those communities, so it's self-sustaining. And I was told that the main occupations which are in there for the older folks there help childcare and caregiving. That's one. Number two is farming, urban farming.
Okay.
Three is cafe. They run cafe for the older people, and recycling.
Right.
Recycling. So these are the things that the old people look back to do. Yeah. Something for us to learn.
So there are opportunities.
Opportunities. There are businesses there. We can bring these businesses to our HDB precinct. Possible.
Yes. Any closing thoughts on the budget? Any hopes?
I think it's an expensive budget with an A.
Expensive or expansive?
Yeah,
both.
expensive.
Both.
Yeah,
expensive.
both. At the same time, also, I would say it's comprehensive. At the same time, inclusive, in that we address some of the short-term challenges that we need to overcome. Right. And not forgetting the fact that we still need to look at the medium and longer term measures, especially if digital disruption, technological changes, what's happening globally.
And, the way the government has handled the crisis so far has instilled confidence.
Yes.
And I think the budget has added more confidence. I think it's important for us to, particularly the business community, to have that sense of confidence. It's not all gloom and doom. Let's have confidence, because this will blow over and this part of the world is going to grow, and there are many, many opportunities for us. I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there's a big market that we can tap, and will be in a better place following the crisis.
So I think the most important thing about the budget is that it sends a signal about the resources the government is willing to commit to combating the COVID-19 crisis. That was the most important thing. I think as far as the other measures in the budget go, as the budget coming in, at the end of a term of government, it's mostly about, I think, staying the course and continuing with the measures that we've already been putting in place number of years ago in terms of economic restructuring, transformation, and so on. And I think that's why we don't see any new programs, but rather just continued funding for these existing programs. And I think what would be very useful is to also take stock and see what has been working and how to think about improving these programs, initiating new ones in a new term of government looking forward.
If we are just focusing on older folk, we also need to focus on the women folk. Yeah, I think we probably seen too many measures because of our circumstances in this to include them, but in the next few budgets, I hope there will be more emphasis on women.
There we have to call it to a close. Thank you very much for joining us. Thanks to our panelists for a very stimulating discussion.